All right, so last class we ended off with finishing up the blend shapes for our character. And at this point, we're ready to start cleaning up our rig. So we're going to need a Worldcon so we can position our character, scale it, and that sort of thing. We're going to need a high res, low res switch. We're also going to need to go through and any of the geometries that need to, I guess, maintain sort of their rigidity, but they're not part of the original skinning. We're going to need those to follow along with the rest of the rig. So we're going to start parenting those elements to the rig, and then we also add a high res, low res switch so we can go between our low res version of our model and our high res version of our model. So I'm going to start by parenting any of the geometries that we didn't skin to the rig. And again, that's going to vary for all of you just depending on how you've approached the different geometries. So with my particular character, it's going to be most of these elements here in the head. So the hair, the eyebrows, the eyes, and the tongue. Now, as part of our rigging process, we actually already did the eyes and the eyebrows. So if I were to grab my controller here for the head and rotate it, you know, the eyes and the eyebrows are already following along. So those are already taken care of, but these other elements I will want to, again, consider. Now with my character, the only other geometries I have left are the hair and the tongue. So I'm going to go ahead and shift select both of these. And before I parent them to the rig, I want to clean them up real quick. So I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, and I'm going to tear this menu out, and I'm just going to go down the list and hit all of these real quick to make sure all the history and everything's deleted on these. And then I'm going to freeze their transformation. So I'm going to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. And so at this point, it's just a matter of discerning, you know, what part of the body each one of these geometries needs to follow. So with the hair, I need it to follow the entire head. So when the head rotates, it follows along with it. So in this case, I want to parent this to head joint 2. So I'm going to select the hair. I'll shift select head joint 2 and hit P to parent. And then if I grab the controller up here and move it, it should follow along. So that's good. In terms of the mouth, so if you have gums, teeth, and a tongue, you just need to determine what part of the body those parts need to follow. Anything that's in the bottom of the mouth, so the lower jaw area, those all get parented to jaw joint 1. Because when the mouth opens and closes, so if I were to grab our jaw controller and rotate it down, those elements should follow along with this jaw joint. Now, in terms of anything in the upper part of the mouth or the roof of the mouth, those need to follow head joint 2. So when I rotate the head, it should follow along with the head, but when I rotate the jaw, you know, when I rotate the bottom jaw, the things in the top of the mouth shouldn't move with this controller. So with my character, I only have a tongue, so that's part of the lower jaw, so I'll select that. First, I will shift select the jaw joint 1 and then hit P to parent. Now, some of you may have accessories and various things like that. It really just need to determine what part of the body it needs to follow along with. So let's say your character has glasses on. Those would be parented to the head joint 2. If you have various things throughout the body, let's say you have pockets that you modeled separately, belt loops, belt buckles, and those sorts of things. We just need to determine how should those things deform, or should they deform, and then if so or if not, how do we attach it to our character? So let's go with that example of the belt buckle. There's probably a couple ways you could approach that belt buckle. So, you know, usually something like that, it's made out of metal or a rigid it would have rigid properties. Odds are I would probably parent that to your hip joint. That way when your hip rotates, it will move with the rotation of your hips. Something else I might recommend that would be a little more natural, there's a plugin or a script I can get you called DJ Rivet, and it uses Maya's hair follicle system to attach these objects to the surface of your character's body or geometry, and when it rotates or moves or deforms, that object will deform and follow that surface. And I would recommend that, especially if you have belt loops or pockets of any kind that need to follow your character's geometry. I find that it's a little easier to use DJ Rivet as opposed to skinning those sorts of things, because you run into a lot of issues where, let's say you move your character forward or bend the spine forward, and you have a pocket on your chest. a lot of times what will happen is that geometry underneath will actually penetrate through, let's say, the pocket or whatever it's on top. So again, I would recommend using DJ Rivet in those cases. But yeah, if you do have other accessories and things like that and you're not sure, just let me know, and we can sit down and take a look at your rig to see how those geometries might need to follow. You know, if we need to skin it, use DJ Rivet, or if it's just going to be as simple as parenting it to your rig. So that's it for parenting those things to my character. The next thing I want to do is I want to start cleaning my outliner up so it's not such a mess. I don't want to see all of these nodes. I just want my character to be under one final node. Now to do that, I am going to need to create a world con. So let's start there first. So I'm going to bring up my Rigging 101 wire controls. And again, I don't really care what you use as long as it's easy to see, select, makes sense, that sort of thing. So in here under the character tab, they do have this transform, which is a circle with 4 arrows on all 4 sides there. So this would be a good one for a world con. You could use the directional arrows, so like this 4-sided fat would maybe be a good one. Scale that up around your character's feet. That would be okay. I am going to use a circle. Kind of boring, but it'll get the job done. So I'm just going to use a circle. Again, it's up to you what you want to use. Now I do want this to be scaled up fairly large just so I can easily see it around my character there at the bottom of their feet. And then once I get that scaled up the way I want, I'm going to go ahead and select it, and let's go up here, modify. Let's freeze its transformations and then also delete its history. Let's name it. So I'm going to call this kid underscore world underscore con for con. Now I know that kind of goes against all of our other naming conventions. So up to this point, we've named all of our controllers. We've abbreviated it CTL. I do want to distinguish this a little bit from the rest of the controllers, so I'm going to call it con, world con. Let's go ahead and hit enter to finalize that. And now what we need to do is we need to start grouping everything together so that we can get it all under this controller and then have everything scale up uniformly the way we would expect it to if I were to grab this controller and scale it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to group everything that's associated with our controllers together under one group node. And so that's any controller, locator node, or group node associated with those controllers. Now your outliner might be organized a little differently than mine, so instead of one really quick way to do it would be to select this controller here, hold shift, and then grab all of these. But if it's organized a little differently, so mine, it just happens that all of my controllers are aligned in a row, but yours might not be organized this way. You might have some geometry or joints or something in between. So instead, let's just be extra careful. And then what I'm going to do instead is I'll start here at the top of the hierarchy and just work my way through and look for anything that's associated with the controller. On my keyboard, I'll hold the control key and I'll just click one at a time and go through and find anything that's a controller. So I want my root. I want all of these the controller groups, so the parent control group nodes, all of these I want. So I'll control select these. I want both feet. I want all these locators. You'll want to grab any of these hidden nodes. So these are the from the IK-FK switch. So now it looks like currently my IK is currently hidden, but I still want to grab those controllers. So I'm going to hold control and grab those even though they're hidden. Let's see, these are still these parent control group nodes. I want those, the eyes. Yep, so let's just keep going through and we're going to grab all these group nodes. The only thing I do not want to include in this is the world con. I do not want to group the world con to this. With all of those selected, I'll just go ahead and hit Control G. And then let's name this. So I'm going to call this kid underscore all underscore CTL. So it's all of our controllers under one group node. The next thing I want to do is select all the geometry that's not parented to the rig. So I just want to grab whatever I can see here in the outliner. And with mine, it's really just these 4 pieces of geometry. So I've got, it looks like 2 shoes, my body, and my face. My hair, my eyes, and eyebrows, they're not going to be in here because they're already parented to the rig. So I'm not going to select those. I just want to grab what's outside of the rig itself. So I'm going to shift select all 4 of those geometries. And let's go ahead and group those to themselves. So I'll do a Control G. Let's go ahead and name this, and I'm going to call this one kid underscore all underscore geo. And so that's all of our remaining geometry. Now what I want to do is I want to group my joints and that group node that's all controllers under the WorldCon itself. So let's deselect that Geo group node, and let's grab the root here. So I'm going to click once on that root to highlight it. Let's hold Control and select the Kid All Control group node. And then with both of those things selected, I'm going to middle mouse click and drag them into the WorldCon. So I'm going to middle mouse click, and let's just drag them right into here. And then if I were to expand that WorldCon inside, I should have the root. Now the root is the top of the hierarchy, so that should be my entire joint system. And then again, the Kid All Control node, group node should be in there as well. Let's go ahead and collapse that, or yeah, and then the last thing I want to do now is I want to select the WorldCon and the All Geo node. So let's go ahead and shift select both of those here from the outliner. And then I'm going to group those into one node. So I'm going to, with both of those selected, press Control G. And then I'm going to call this, I'm going to call it kid underscore rig underscore GRP for group. And that way our outliner is completely clean and our entire rig fits under one single node. The reason being is, let's say we have a scene file with 5, 10, 20 characters. It would get awful messy here in the outliner if we didn't have them all consolidated into one node, especially if we had left it like it was before, because then there would just be tons and tons and tons of information here. So this just makes your scene a lot tidier, especially if we're prepping for a larger scene with multiple characters in it. It's another reason why we named everything specifically the way we did. So everything's got a prefix with our character's name, and then we named every object, joint, and so forth. We included, what that object is somewhere in that naming convention. So it just keeps everything tidy and clean. Now, if I want to test this to make sure it's working okay, what I'll do is grab the world controller here. So I'll just select that by itself, and then I should be able to scale this up. And as I scale it up, everything should scale uniformly with it. So my geometry, my controllers, all of that should move with it. And then if I were to translate it and rotate it, everything should go along with this character. Now again, the primary purpose of the WorldCon is to, when you bring your character into a scene, it's to set your character's initial position. So let's say we import it into an environment and we just want to match it up here with our scene. We would set that with this WorldCon. We'd rotate and translate it into place. And then if our character is not matching the scale of our scene, we could scale up this controller so that we could match our character to the scale of the scene that they're occupying. But once we get that position, we would never animate this controller. Again, it's just to set the initial position of our character. If it was frozen, I should be able to come in now and zero out our rotations and translations and take my scales to 1. And my character should go back to their default position here in the center of the world space. So that WorldCon's all taken care of. The next thing I'll want to do now is add that high-res, low-res switch so that we can go between our low-res form to our subdivided high-res form. So let's go ahead and set that up. The first thing I'm going to do is grab the controller and let's add a new attribute to it. So I'm going to go to Edit, Add Attribute, and here for the long name, let's call it Smoothing. And it doesn't really matter what you call this as long as I can easily identify what the function does. So I'm just going to call mine Smoothing. Under data type, we want integer, not float. So float will go between decimal points. Integer will be whole numbers. So we don't want to have decimals when we're thinking about our subdivision. So let's go ahead and set that to integer. And then down below, we want a minimum and a maximum. So our minimum is 0, so that's going to be our low res. And then the highest we want to subdivide this is going to be 2. If we go much beyond that, so like if let's say we didn't specify a maximum and we allowed our animators to jack this up to 10 or 15 or whatever, there's a very good chance that once we set that to 10, it's going to crash Maya every time. So I want to cap this out at 2 so that we don't run the risk of accidentally setting this higher than 2 and again crashing Maya. So I'm going to go ahead and with that set up, I'm going to hit add, or let's just hit OK. And now I should have the smoothing attribute over here in the channel box. And now what we need to do is select all of our geometry, so anything that's a polygon mesh, and we're going to smooth it or add subdivisions to it. Let me close this for now. And so with my character, it's going to be everything except for the eyes. Hopefully you're not using NURBS for your eyes. This is just the way the character came. So, ideally, and I would recommend that you stick with polys. But in my case, I'm going to select everything except for the eyes. So I'm going to grab the hair, the head, my eyebrows. I'm going to come in here and grab my tongue. So again, anything that's a polygon mesh. Let's grab the body and both feet. And then with everything selected, I'm going to go to the modeling menu. Let's go up here to mesh and hit smooth. And so you'll notice once you hit smooth, it'll come up with a dialog box here, and we can set the division. So this dictates how many times it's going to subdivide our geometry. Now, this is based off of the history on this geometry, and so if we were to go over here to the, let's just select the body, for example, and look at its inputs. We now have this input labeled Poly Smooth Face 5. If I click that, I get the settings for this function, and in here you have divisions. So this divisions in this channel box is the same as the setting that we're getting out of this dialog box that came up. So if I were to come in here and let's say key in a 2 and hit enter, it's going to continue to subdivide my model. If I key in 0, it'll go back to low res. So this is history based. This is another reason why you don't want to delete the history on your geometry once we've rigged it, because if you do, you're going to break your rig. Let's go ahead and set that back up to 1. And now what we need to do is we need to find a way to connect that attribute on the controller to this Poly Smooth Face node. So let's go ahead and select the controller. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the connection editor to accomplish this. So I'll grab this controller, let's go up to edit, and let's go to connection editor. On the left hand side, with that controller still selected, I just want to hit reload left just to make sure that WorldCon is in here. And then I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and that smoothing attribute that I added should be right there. So now we need to find a way to select those Poly Smooth Face nodes and load them to the right. Now you can't just select the geometry and then click on it here from the channel box. That's not going to work. What we're going to need to do is we're going to have to unhide it in the outliner here on the left hand side. So by default, Maya likes to hide all that stuff from us so we don't get overwhelmed, and so there's not more information than we need to see here in the outliner. To bring those up, what we're going to do here in the outliner is click on display, and this first option here, DAG objects only. If we toggle that off, it's going to unhide all of those nodes that are working in the background that we don't see. And now what we want to do is scroll. Usually these are towards the bottom, maybe about 3/4 of the way down. So I'm going to scroll down until I see those Poly Smooth Face nodes. And so right there, the icon for these, it kind of looks like 3 panels stacked in front of one another. And right there I have Poly Smooth Face 1. And so you'll have one of these for every geometry in your scene. So you may have more or less than I do. It really depends on how much geometry you have. So let's say you modeled your character as a single piece of geometry. You're only going to have one Poly Smooth Face in here. So just keep that in mind. You may have to do this more or less than I do. And now what we want to do is one Poly Smooth Face node at a time. We're going to load it to the right, and we're going to connect that smoothing attribute to the divisions attribute of this node. So let's go ahead and with Poly Smooth Face 1 selected, let's load it to the right. In the left panel, I'm going to highlight the smoothing attribute, and then in the right panel, I'm going to connect it to divisions. Now you'll notice as I start connecting these, it's going to immediately start kicking my geometry down to the lowest subdivision level. The reason being is because my controller right now, that attribute is set to 0, so it's going to automatically force these divisions to take on that 0 value. So let's go ahead and start connecting it. So here with smoothing highlighted, let's go ahead and click divisions here on the right. And you'll notice my hair just went to its subdivision level of 0. Let's move to a small Poly Smooth Face 2. I'll select that, I'll reload right, and we'll connect it to divisions. And so I'm going to go through each one of these one at a time, and we're going to connect all of these to our controller there. Alright, and so that's all of our Poly Smooth Face nodes. Let's go ahead and close this. Here where it says display, let's click that and go to DAG objects only. And then we could test this out. So if I grab my WorldCon down here and play with the smoothing, if I key in a 1, it should subdivide my whole model. And then if I key in a 2, it'll subdivide it 1 division further. Cool. And so I'm going to set that back down to 0, and we'll go to our low res. Let's see, what else do we need to do to this? So we've got our Worldcon, we've got our high res, low res switch. I guess the last thing we need to do at this point is we need to, our job as a rigger is to make sure our animators can't break the rig. And so now we need to go through each controller and determine, should this be animated in this particular attribute. So with the head controller, for example, if I grab this, I want to look at its attributes and think about what this controller does. So with this controller, it should really just rotate the head like so. And then, obviously we've connected this to our blend shape, so we need the smile, the frown, and those sorts of things. But other than that, I don't want this to translate, and I don't want it to scale. So I shouldn't be able to grab this controller and move it like this, because I don't want it to lift off of my character's head. I also don't want to scale it. There should be no reason for me to do this. So with this controller, all I want is rotation, visibility, and then those blend nodes that we added. So what I'll do is left click and drag from translate X down to Z so that these are highlighted. And then on my keyboard, I'll hold Control, and I'm going to left click and drag from scale X down to Z. With all of those selected, let's right click. Let's go down to lock and hide selected. And so the only thing I should have left are my rotations, visibility, and my blend shapes. Now, real quick, if for some reason you accidentally lock and hide something you didn't mean to, we can always get it back. So if you go to Edit and go down to Channel Control, it'll load this dialog box, and on the far left-hand side, you'll have Keyable, which are all the attributes that we can currently see and set keys to here in the channel box. And then everything here in the center are attributes that have been locked and hidden. And so if I were to scroll down, I think the translations are a little ways down here. So these are the translation attributes that I just locked and hid. So if I were to grab these and hit move, you'll notice it puts them back here in the left, and then I can see them again over here in the channel box. So just keep that in mind. It's these are never permanent, so if you accidentally do lock and hide something you didn't mean to, we can get it back that way. All right, so that's our head. Let's move on now to the neck. And so it's going to be the same. I don't want translations or scale, so let's just grab all those and lock and hide. And so that should just have rotation and visibility. Same thing for the jaw here, so let's grab that. And I only want rotation, I don't want scale or translation. We can do multiple controllers at once. So like with my FK controllers here, these FK should only do rotation. Again, these do not translate or scale. So let's shift select all of our FK controllers at the same time. Let's actually see if we can do the spine and hips at the same time. So the spine, hips, and all the FK controllers, they should only control rotation. So let's see if it'll let us do all of these at once. And let's just double check them. So I'm going to grab one controller at a time, and I just want to verify that all I have are rotations, visibility, and then in the case of our wrists, we should have the IKFK switch. So that's good. Let's just keep moving on here. So those are good. Yep. Cool. Well, let's check the spines, and yep, those are good. And the hip. Cool. Let's see, what else do we have? The clavicles, I probably could have included those with the previous selection, but clavicles, they should only get rotation. So let's go ahead and lock and hide the scale and translate. The finger controls, let's grab both of those at the same time. These should only control visibility and the fingers themselves, so I don't want translate, rotate, or scale on these. So let's just go ahead and grab all of those attributes there and lock and hide those. And so again, I should just have visibility and then the individual finger controls. Let's see, let's switch over to our IKFK arms. Or just our IK arms, I should say. And let's see, let's start with our pole vectors. So I'm going to grab both of these. Now these should only get translation, because again, these dictate where our elbows are pointing, like so. And so that comes out of translation. So let's go ahead and lock and hide rotation and scale. Let's see, our IK ARM controllers here. These should only be translation, so let's go ahead and lock and hide, rotate, and scale on these. I think that's it for our IK. I guess while I'm here, I'm going to grab these IK handles real quick and hide them. So I'm just going to grab those and hit Control H, like so. And that should be good. Let's check our root. Now our root should really have everything except for scale. So I do want translation, and I do want rotation, like so, but I don't want to be able to scale it. So let's grab the scales and lock and hide those. Let's see, we already did our hips. Let's grab our knees. And so this is going to be pretty similar to our elbow pole vectors. So no rotation, no scale, but we do want translate. So lock and hide those. Let's see, our feet. We should be able to rotate these and we should be able to translate them, but we do not want scale. So I guess we'll shift select both feet controllers and let's just lock and hide scale. And that should be good there. Not sure why there's a key on that. Let me delete that. And let's see, is that everything? Our world con should have everything. So it should have translate, scale, and rotation. Oh, almost forgot our eyes. So the eye controller out here should only get translation. We do not rotate or scale this. So let's lock and hide, rotate, and scale on this. And that's good to go. Let me go ahead and save this real quick. So we'll do an incremental save. And let's see, what else do we need to do this? I think that's pretty much it. Now I'm going to add one more attribute to my WorldCon. This isn't one that I will require that you guys do, but I think it would be nice to have, and it's going to be a visibility toggle for our controllers. So I'm going to grab my WorldCon, I'm going to go to Edit, Add Attribute. I'm going to do a Boolean because that's going to be an on-off switch. And up here for the long name, I will do controls. For the name, let's go ahead and hit OK. And then I'm going to do this through the connection editor. So we'll go to Edit, Connection Editor. I'm going to load left here, the WorldCon, and go to the bottom and select the controls attribute that I just added. Over here in the outliner, I'm going to expand this until I find the all controller group node. So this kid all CTL, let's grab that and load it to the right. And then let's connect this controls to visibility here. And as soon as I do that, the controller should disappear. Now, the controllers for the fingers get left behind because they're actually parented to the rig. So let's do those while we're here as well. So I'm going to grab that finger control, reload right, and connect it to visibility. And then I'll grab the other finger control, load it to the right, and add it to visibility. And then I should be able to grab my WorldCon down here and key this controllers off and on to hide those or bring them back. Let me check. Oh, no, that's working. I just want to check to make sure the FK hides as well. So I'm going to switch these over to FK. And then I'm going to toggle that on and off just to make sure it also works. Cool. So this is all set, ready to go. Actually, let me color my WorldCon real quick. There we go. So that's my rig all finalized and done. So I'm going to go up here. We'll save one more time. File, save scene as. And I'm going to call this crawl Zachary underscore rig underscore final. Hit save. And that's all done and ready to go. So the rest of today will be work day, all day Wednesday, and Friday will be work days. And then your finalized rig is due a week from today. So Monday, at the beginning of class. Now, I would refer to week 11 folder. So in the week 11 folder, there's a PDF. So let's open that up real quick and take a look at it. So in terms of the rig, it's not really a subjective sort of thing. In terms of the rig itself, it either works or it doesn't. And so if you can go through this entire list and hit every one of these points, you'll get 100% for the assignment. So there's a total of 14 items here. Each item is worth a total of 2 points. So let me split my screen here so we can take a look. So I'll just go through this list here. So we'll start here at the top. So number one, controllers for all joints. Do not want to have to select anything but controllers to move or manipulate your character. So you should have controls for every single joint here. So as long as you followed along and you've included all the joint systems that I have, or controller systems, you should be good to go. Now this also includes your controllers need to be named. They also have to have frozen transformations. So what I mean by that is I should be able to select every one of your controllers, and in the channel box, the attributes should be frozen. So if you have translations or rotations, they should all be frozen at 0 at the default pose. Scales are always 1. So if I grab the Worldcon, for example, when it's frozen, your translate and rotations are 0, scales are 1. So again, controllers are named with frozen transformations, and I should be able to select them and move your character. You'll also need IK legs. Now that's just something that happens by default with the way that we set up our legs. So that means we have these controllers down here by your feet. And if I select them, I should be able to do this and move your legs, or I should be able to grab your root and pull it down and your feet stay planted to the ground. You should also have pull vectors here for your knees. And so if I grab these and move them, we can control the rotation or where your knees are pointed. Let's see, reverse foot setup. So that's that reverse foot setup we set on both of these controllers. So if I grab these, you should have all these attributes here. So the ball roll, toe bend, heel roll, toe roll, pivot, heel pivot, inner roll, and outer roll. And what I do is I go through and I just test these like so, just to make sure we get these functions out of your rig. So we should have all of that. Let's see, independent control of the knee rotation of the foot. So we already talked about that, and that's all coming from the pull vectors out here. So again, I should be able to select these and point your knees wherever I want them. Now this, I need to update this because this is an older document. It says FK or IK spine control. We did an FK, so that means forward kinematics, which means I can come up here, I can select your controller one at a time and rotate it. That's all that means. So you should have an FK spine like mine. It won't be IK. Let's see, IK-FK switch for the arms. So you should have an IK-FK setup here where I can blend between the two. So again, the FK is going to be a total of 3 controllers, one for the shoulder, elbow, and wrist. And that means I can rotate one joint at a time going forward through the hierarchy here. And then you should have a switch on each wrist controller that allows me to switch between FK to IK, and then I should be able to grab your IK arm control and move your arm, and then also have a pull vector back here to control where your elbow points. So you should have that for both arms. Eyeball control, so it's going to be this eyeball control out here. I should be able to grab the whole main eye control and have both eyes follow along, and then I should be able to also select each individual eye control and control those eyes individually. Let's see, decent skinning of the geometry to the skeleton. So I don't know if you guys recall, but when I initially skinned my character, the weights probably weren't the best. Things that I look out for is, when I set this up, when I move the arm, the face would tear off. Which we want to avoid. So just decent skinning. We don't have parts of the anatomy controlling other parts of the anatomy that wouldn't make sense. So for example, if I rotate your index finger, your middle, pinky, or ring finger should not go with it. So a lot of times that happens when our fingers are modeled close together. So again, just decent skinning. A minimum of 5 blend shapes, and I don't really care what your blend shapes are, but you have to have 5, and so I should be able to get to those either through the menu here. So if I go to Windows, Animation Editors, and go to the Shape Editor, you should have a minimum of 5 targets, basically. So here I actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So mine actually has 6 set up in here. So you don't have to do all the same ones that I do. I would for sure have an eye blink so we can at least blink your character's eyes, but some other easy ones you can throw in there, smile, frown. You could do other expressions if you want, but yeah, a minimum of 5. I won't require that you do a corrective blend shape, but that might be another easy one to throw in there. So for mine, for example, I set up a corrective blend shape so that when I rotate my foot controller here, that pant leg automatically lifts up with it, and so that would also qualify as a blend shape. but you'll have to have a minimum of 5 of those. Let's see, you'll need a world layout controller, so this world con here at the feet, and then I should be able to select this and scale it up, rotate it, and everything should scale and move uniformly with that one controller. Let's see, you'll need a high-res, low-res switch, so you should, under your world con here, have some type of smoothing attribute where I can switch between your different subdivision levels when I key that in. Again, I don't require this controls visibility toggle. That's not required, but you can put that there if you want. Let's see, individual finger controls. So you should have these individual finger controls. When I grab this, we should have curls, spreads, and cups. And when I test these out on your rigs, what I do is I just grab all of your curls first, and I will do this just to make sure all of your fingers curl. I'll grab your spreads and move them from side to side like so, and then I'll grab your cups and do this just to make sure that they go in like that. Let's see, open and close your mouth. So we should be able to grab your jaw controller here and rotate it and open the mouth. And let's see, the last one here, we need a tidied up outliner here. So if I expand this and take a look at my outliner, everything should be contained under one single node, and everything needs to be named and stick with a naming convention of some sort. So again, we always have a prefix to identify the character in its group node. Again, that's because if we have multiple characters in a scene, if everything was just called, let me fix this, not RIP, but RIG, huh? If we had, let's say, 20 nodes in here and they just all said rig group, we wouldn't know which character is which without selecting it. So that's why we add that prefix at the beginning, so we know which character is which. So you should stick or adhere to that naming convention. And if I expand this, every single joint should be named. Every geometry, I don't care if you have 100 geometries, every one of them needs to be named with that prefix, what the geometry is or what the object is. So you'll notice all of my joints are labeled with JT because it's a joint. All of my geometries, if I find them in here, wherever they are, they're labeled as poly. So again, everything needs to adhere to that naming convention as we go through. But again, everything should be cleaned up and under a single node. Is there anything else here? No. And so what you'll turn in for Monday, again, a week from today, I would like your Maya project folder, but inside your scenes folder, I only want your final rig file. I do not want every iteration that you've ever created. And then you'll also do a very basic walk cycle, and you don't have to render that one, just play blast it. But I wouldn't save your walk cycle over your final rig, so I would save that as its own scene file when you do that walk cycle. And it doesn't have to be the world's prettiest walk cycle. I'm not going to grade you on your animation, so if the timing and all that is bad, that's fine. The main purpose of that is it's really the best way to test your rig to make sure it's functional. So we need to be able to see that your character can move, animate, and that your skinning looks okay. So when you're doing the sorts of movements throughout the body, certain things aren't tearing or ripping off of your rig. So like I said, it doesn't have to be the prettiest walk cycle. It just needs to be a walk cycle so that I can see that your character can animate. And then, yeah, so you'll play blast that and include that in your movies folder of your final project. So that'll be due Monday. So I'll stop here, and again, rest of today will be workday. Wednesday and Friday will also be work days.